So, hi everyone. My name is Mackenzie Davison. I am coming to you folks from Paul Smith College. I am the student success librarian here. So, that means I have a lot of different things under my umbrella, but I'm in charge of the teaching and reference program at the campus, as well as I oversee our entire student worker program. So, I do a lot of the program implementation, and I do actually have another coworker who helps with that program as well as our daily supervisor. So, we have a kind of two folks there, and I'll get more into that as well later.
Hi, I am Mitch Brzett McCormick. I am the Service Desk Coordinator at O&D Young Library here at St. Lawrence University. Um, I wear many hats in my position, so I oversee all of our student employment here at the desk. Everything from interviewing, hiring, training, application development for students to apply to jobs. I also oversee student hire paperwork. I also do payroll, not to mention regular library duties, tax management, all of our training and workshop programs for our service desk students.
Hi, everybody. My name's Robin Booth, and I'm with the Jefferson Community College Library in Watertown, New York. I oversee 6 student workers at the present time for the spring semester. I've been with the library for about 7.5 years now. We are located on the entire second floor of the CLC building here on campus. And I basically interview, hire, mentor, and supervise our student workers. Thank you.
Great, welcome. Thank you, everyone. We're just going to go through some of the main topics that we had discussed in the description and in planning for this program. And the first that makes the most sense is sort of like the hiring, the starting of it all. Hiring and training, what are the types of applications and the interview process that each of you sort of go through to get things started, and when does that start for you in the school year?
So, for Paul Smith, we have a slightly shrunken team. We started initially with 10 to 12 students every semester, but throughout the last 2 years, that has moved down to 6. And because of that, it definitely makes the hiring process a lot easier. There's just a little bit less to do. We tend to start about a month prior to the beginning of the next semester. So that's something that we start pretty close to when the semester begins. We have both, pros and cons to that. We do have a lot of interest because we are about 4 weeks out, so we do get a lot of applications very quickly. But then it is a very quick process to make sure that goes in place. Our hiring is done through our HR department as well as within my position. So I receive all of the resumes and applications. So we ask for a resume application and a very short CV, a little kind of, here's what I've done, kind of tell me a little bit. We have asked for cover letters in the past as well, but we don't get as much luck with that. And I don't think it's necessarily a have to have for a position like this. So we kind of done away with that. So that's how we tend to do it with collaboration with our HR department. And then we will call folks in and do, at least these last couple of years, we've done initial Zoom interviews, which has worked out really well to do students prior to them getting on campus to get that initial one done. And then we'll have folks when they get to campus, we'll do a second interview with my other coworker and I, or if they're not here for the day, they'll have someone else call in so we can have 2 folks to interview. So that's our process.
I have a rather large group of students. I manage anywhere between 23 to 25 students at our desk. Because we are a combined service desk, we are combined with an IT help desk. So we have one student who does 2 separate jobs. They can answer an IT help desk phone call and then turn around and check out a book or help a patron find a book. So when we start hiring our students, we start actually in the spring semester of the year. And we have students who are actually seeking us out. And I start a list of students who are interested, and I reach out to them with the applications and kind of give them an application date of when to get that in. Then myself and our service desk administrator, Eddie, we will sit down and we'll interview the students together. Over the past couple of years, it's been through Zoom. Occasionally, we'll have like a single student who's applying for like a summer semester or something. So we'll sit down and do an in-person, safely distanced, of course. And then what we do is we make our decisions and we offer, we let them know that were accepted into the position before the end of the school year so that I've got a complete list. I can start doing the hiring process in, I want to say mid-July, and we are all set to roll with students starting in the fall. And when they come in, I'll do a welcome to the service desk. This is what circulation is going to look like. Eddie has gone more virtual with his training, um, so it's an interesting process, and we're looking at doing some improvements with that as well.
Okay, so at our library, we have what's called the JCC Libraries student employment applications that we use. And students can come in any time of the year and can complete an application. The application also contains a job description as well as a link that they can go on. We do have a link on the JCC website where students can go on. It's the Canon link. It's a JCC Employment Network where all students can go on this link and they can actually see who is hiring for student workers in the different areas on campus. So what we do is I compile when the students bring these applications back. I have a folder and I keep all the applications together in a folder. And as Mackenzie was saying and Mitch, around April is when I start creating flyers, and I post flyers all around campus. We also have a Facebook page, so sometimes I will put a flyer up on the Facebook page and the job, what the actual job posting is. And also, I have networking with our career services downstairs, and I let them know when I'm in need of a student worker, and they're really, really good about sending people my way, as well as the EOP program. We're always letting them know when we need students and we're going to be hiring for the fall semester. It kind of just gives us a head start. And like in the fall as well, like when we know we're going to be hiring for the spring semester for student workers, we usually start around November, same kind of thing. And then once I have applications or I have received cover letters or resumes, I kind of then at that time, I will contact the student and say, hey, by any chance, are you interested in interviewing with us? And if they are, then we usually set up a time and a day that they come in. Cindy Sloan also will sit in. She's another library staff member, and she'll sit in on the interviews with me as well. The interview takes about 40 minutes, and we ask them random questions. Some examples of those questions might be, why do you want to work for the library? Tell me a little bit about yourself. What do you know about our library? It just kind of gives them a feel and gives us a feel if they're interested or not in the position. We also have what we call a fun question that we ask them, and it's kind of a little ways that we can kind of break the ice with them, because sometimes this is their very first interview or might be their very first job that they've ever had. So the fun question could be something like, hey, can you tell me if you wanted to be a certain ice cream flavor, what would that be? And it always creates a smile on their face, and it always puts the candidate at ease. So they usually like that kind of a question. And then when we are done with the interview questions, then we leave time for them to ask us questions if they have any, in case there was something that we didn't cover in the actual interview. We also do a pre-employment test at the end of the interview. It's like a spelling test, and it also is like alphanumerical, where it gives the students a chance to put things in order, and we kind of get an idea like how they might be with the Library of Congress. We also do a 5-minute personality test after the end of the interview. And it's kind of a way to get to know, like they rate themselves on certain things. And at the end of the personality test, it'll tell them whether they're more like a lion or a beaver or an otter or a golden retriever. And it just gives us kind of an idea what type of personality that they might have. And then we just kind of go from there afterwards. There's a lot of factors involved with interviewing. It's not just having an interview with someone. There's a lot of factors when we do hire that we have to look at. For instance, we have to look at to see how their grades are. We have to see if they qualify for federal work study. We have to see how much they qualify for federal work study. And then we have to see if their class schedule fits around the library's needs. because we do have to, when we do hire them and assign them shifts, we do have to hire them around their class schedule. So there's a little bit involved and a lot of factors involved when hiring the student workers.
Right, and that was a perfect segue into the next part, which is always the best part, I think, scheduling. How does scheduling work? The good, the bad, the ugly, all in between.
Yeah, so just to piggyback off that, what Robin said, scheduling is a very big thing for us to get out in front of when we are interviewing and chatting with folks in that initial stage as well. We try to tell them that, we would really prefer a certain amount of hours be worked throughout the time. Sometimes we have folks who just really want this job, and they don't necessarily understand what working in the library is like, and they don't know that there's going to be some extra special projects, and they think it's only going to be sitting at the front desk and doing homework. And we try to, hit that in the middle of like, it's a work study position. So there's both here. So we do try to get ahead of that right now, because we are a smaller staff than we have been in the past. We have gone back to more manual scheduling than what we may have done in the past. So with 6 folks, we really do ask ahead of time, can you send us your times when you cannot work? That seems to be the prompted question that works best for us. When we do ask for, send us only your preference of hours, we tend to miss giant sections of time. So we do say, feel free to put in a preference, but I would like officially when you cannot work. And then we send out a draft schedule. We try to get it out 3 weeks before the semester if we have all of the folks set up in that our full staff. And if not, then as soon as we can to that semester. And we do allow them to, write back in. As I'm sure folks are aware, we often get last minute changes to scheduling. It's one of the most exciting parts of managing student workers up until that add drop period really ends. That's really when the finalized schedule feels like it's in place. So we try to be flexible, but we do have them sign an employment agreement form that goes over things like their expectations when they show up on time, what their kind of calling out schedule looks like, how they're going to manage a sick time, things like that, where they can't come, they want to swap schedules. So before they really start their first shift, after that interview that's gone well, they've accepted it, they read through that agreement with us to make sure that they understand what that looks like. And if we do have any problems with that, then it comes into different meetings with my coworker, then with me. Then that would be kind of a third strike conversation after that if it is not going well.
You answered a lot of this, Mackenzie, but there was a question about, is it a regular issue for anyone else that you ask a student for their availability, then they make schedule changes and then flip-flop. So you addressed some of that in your response. So like maybe Mitch and Robin too, if you have anything to add on that part. But Mitch, you have a very interesting scheduling thing to talk about.
So I schedule a lot differently than sitting down with a piece of paper and schedule preferences and everything like that. So starting out with going into the fall of the year, I start conversations with my returning students at the beginning of August, and I start setting up scheduling sessions via Zoom. And what we do is we sit down and we will schedule together one-on-one with their class schedule. And so what I try to do is I try to create an optimal schedule for them so that they're not stressing out, they're not cutting themselves short, not missing lunch breaks or anything like that. So, and it's worked very well in the past. We know when we sit down and do our scheduling that there's going to be a couple of weeks where students are probably going to shift around a little bit. But we've always had very good luck with students saying, hey, can you work this shift? I'll work that one. So sometimes our students will come up with a solution together, which I encourage it. That also encourages teamwork as well. I use a scheduler called When I Work. When I Work is the ultimate work scheduling thing. You can set up different types of shifts, types of positions. So in our When I Work scheduler, we have I have a stacks management position for students. I have a shelver position and I have a service desk position, but we also have an IT tech, which works downstairs that I don't usually supervise. So setting that all up is really nice. And then when we get to the end of the fall semester, I sit down with my students again one-on-one with their schedules, and we set up their spring schedule as well, knowing that we're going to have 2 weeks um, where they're going to be doing some shifting around. So we know we're going to be pretty flexible with that. So it's usually I try to schedule for their optimum, what works the best for them. And I've discovered that when I sit down one-on-one with them, that it actually decreases the amount that they shift around in those first couple of weeks of classes.
I love that potential for that scheduling tool. Like if you have a lot of students, I can see that really being a benefit to everyone. We did have another question real quick in the chat about flexibility in schedules from Kristen. Do most people have set shifts that need filled throughout the day, like a 1 to 3 or whatever? Or is it all flexible around when the students can work individually? So if you wanted to address that, Robin, and your answer, and then we can have others chime in after.
Sure.
yeah.
So once we do set the schedules for the student workers, that's a very good question. It's usually the same schedule that the student worker will be working on a weekly basis, which makes it really, really nice because that way the student knows when they're going to be working. It's always around their class time, or sometimes they might have a second job. So how I usually do the scheduling is, again, kind of like Mitch, I kind of figure out what student workers will be returning, and then I kind of have to figure out how many students we have to hire for the semester. But because we usually only have anywhere between 5 and 9 student workers, like this semester, I only have 6. I'm fortunate in that sense, that I don't have 20 or more that I have to schedule for. I can't imagine having to do that, Mitch. So I commend you. But what I do, it's like a puzzle. So as soon as the students register for their classes, like in April, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and pull up all the individual students that I'm going to be hiring, or all the student workers that are coming back. And then what I do is I have a master schedule with all the different times. Like it goes from anywhere from like 8 in the morning to 9 o'clock at night, as well as that's Monday through Friday and on Sundays as well, because we are open from 12 to 5 o'clock on Sundays. So what I do is I just start fitting in the students where the needs of the library, like our lunch hour is usually the busiest. So I try to start with the lunch hours first. That's anywhere between, say, 10:30, 11 o'clock till 2 o'clock, which is our busiest time, and schedule during those hours. Then next we have student workers that work, one student worker works with a library staff member at nighttime, Monday through Thursday. So then that's the next thing I try to do is to schedule a student worker for the evening shifts. I usually try to schedule just one person on for each night. That way it makes it fair for everybody and not one person's getting stuck working all the nights. I do have once in a while a student worker might say, hey, I can do 2 nights for you if you need me, which that's always great because sometimes we might not be able to, get somebody to work a night shift. Same with Sundays. So once I get the master schedule down, I also create what's called individual schedules for each student worker. And I highlight out in gray on the spreadsheet where that student worker has classes. And then I just start filling in their names in this different time slots. So I hand out those individual schedules to my student workers. That way they have a copy of their individual schedule. And the master schedule, I keep a copy up at the front desk, as well as I send it to all the other library staff members as well. So sometimes the scheduling works out perfectly and there's no issues. And then other times you'll get everybody scheduled. And this happened to me this semester. And I had a student worker right before the semester started. He said he dropped a few classes, or he added some more classes. So just when you think the schedule's all set and ready to go, it's like boom! It's like, oh no, I gotta change the schedule. So I think that's the scheduling is probably one. I don't know what you think, Mackenzie and Mitch, but I think the scheduling is probably one of the hardest things to do because it's like a puzzle, and if you can get everybody scheduled, great, but other times it can be very challenging.
I'll just jump in there. Very similarly, we have a just a staffing issue when we end up using a lot of our student workers to help us cover our library to staff at all. So especially in the last 2 years, so having that be an extra pressure is really sometimes hard to manage. So I saw some of the questions in there about the set schedules versus being very flexible around that. We also have moved to, when we are hiring students, we tell them, shifts are available between the hours of 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. during the library's operating hours currently. And we try our very best to do that, like to where their schedules can and to make sure we're as covered as possible. We do have some professional staff at our front desk, and then we have our student workers sitting at like the most front of that desk. So it's not the end of the world if they can't make a shift, but we do honestly depend on them a lot to be that kind of like first line out there and helpful with that. So they're here in the evenings until our close with one other staff member. So, there's always that professional staff member backup just in case. But it is something that we do definitely think about. And I know I definitely have considered doing those kind of set hours, and totally fine if overlap happens in the past. Just currently with budget restrictions, we're trying to get the most out of scheduling as possible. So we have definitely tried to do less of that over time. But it's, I think overall, my opinion is I like when it is those set schedules that you can have a couple overlapping, maybe working on multiple projects. That is the ideal. But sometimes, things have changed a lot in the last couple of years. So that's where we're at.
For us, we have a set schedule as well. Because we are so large and we are a combined service point, what we do is I overlap our students. So I'll have one student come in at, say, 8 a.m. in the morning, and then I'll have a second student starting at 9 o'clock. So, and we overlap all throughout the day until about 6 or 6:30. And then in the evenings, we have one student on, plus we also have library staff that comes in the evening called a building supervisor to help oversee building operations and other things like that and be the adult in the room. On the weekends, I only schedule one student. I've cut down our weekend schedules. So because Saturday we are open from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m., there are two shifts, 12 to 4 and a 4 to 8. So students who want to work that longer shift will take those. Sundays are 3 hours long, with the exception of the final one being a 2-hour shift because it is late in the evening from 11 to 1. And I typically do not have issues filling those weekend slots. Everybody wants them because they are a little bit longer shift. I did try some longer shifts. This is one of my failures. I did try longer shifts for a bit for a semester. It totally did not work out. We wound up being stuck without a student if somebody dropped their shift or they got sick or something like that. So it just created really some weirdness in our scheduling. Our students can actually see their schedules. I publish them a week in advance. They can see their schedules. They can also see open shifts when somebody drops, and it gives them a chance to go into the app on their phone or computer, pick up the shift, and do a substitute. So that also works out really well for us sometimes too.
I thought of one other thing as we were talking, that a library that I've worked at in the past would have extended hours for finals and things like that. And the library, this was pre-pandemic, would be open for 24 hours for some of those times. Does anybody, panelists and like the audience, do you have any times where you have 24-hour scheduling of shifts?
In our library, we do not have 24 hours, and we don't ever leave our student workers alone. There's always a library staff member, but again, we are a smaller library, smaller than some other SUNY colleges and universities. But even though we are a smaller library, we do offer a lot of resources, information to our students. But there's always a library staff member. So for us, we are not open 24 hours.
Similar, we don't do a 24-hour scheduling ever, but we do have extended hours. So that does, throw a wrench in things about the last week of classes, because our students are also the ones who would like to use the library during those times and not maybe work. So it's a mix. We have, a couple of students who are definitely wanting those longer shifts until midnight or so. And then others who are, begging for swaps because they need time to study elsewhere. So usually it works out, but we haven't done a 24-hour. We just do extended.
We moved over to an extended from a 24 hours. But I never scheduled students 24 hours. They only worked until 1 a.m. And then actually student security came in to be the adults in the room from 1 to 7 or 7:30 in the morning. It worked out well, but our user stats were not really indicating that there was a big need. So we moved over to extended hours. We're opening a little earlier in the morning. We're staying open a little bit later, but it doesn't really affect the hours we offer to our students during finals weeks.
Great, yeah, and thank you all for the comments about your own particular scenarios too with your schedules. Moving on to the training part, what sorts of training is the most important for you to make sure that you get to when you do your training with your students?
Sure. So something interesting about Paul Smith's College, our stacks are actually organized with Dewey. So coming from a background and previous student worker supervision and library experience with Library of Congress, that was a shift for me just for training in general. And there's also a lot less academic library resources for Dewey training. So that was probably one of the most important things for me starting into the position a while back now, to make sure that my students understood as well. So they initially get front desk etiquette training and Dewey Decimal organization, shelf maintenance, and shelf reading training. And the way that we do that is, especially since moving so deeply into the online world, we ended up making a training module on the same system that our student workers have all of their online classes in. So for us, that's Canvas, but you might be, Moodle, Blackboard, what have you. So they have a course that they're invited to, which is their entire training documentation. And if I have a quick little example of it, I can show very quickly. So it's really simple. You just build it out like a course. I've got a lot of success with this. It outlines and links to documentation that they're going to need for the integrated library system, for their timesheets and scheduling. And then it gives them the reiteration of the training that they've been given in person or in presentations on how to do shelf reading and reminders like that. I try to have those things also either taped to or on a clip on a lot of the different book carts. So it's just like a quick reminder, like if you forgot which order the decimal goes and that this is the larger number, this is the smaller number, just some reminders there, and then some things on like tidiness on shelves. So we try to get the shelf maintenance out front. I feel like it often leads to a lot of questions. So it's a great way to start the conversation with students on like, why is this important? Why do we do this? Helps them locate things themselves too. And I have a screenshot of that I can share later if it's helpful for folks on organization.
Yeah, so because we do have such a large staff, I do a lot of my training in person. So this year I piloted a new program for circulation. So what I was doing is I'm bringing in all of our new circulation students the day before classes start and the day before they start their jobs. And I offered introduction to circulation. So it kind of helps prevent a little bit of deer caught in headlights when they first step behind the desk and I'm just talking at them. So when I do the introduction to circulation, I say, okay, this is what our integrated library system looks like. This is what a checkout looks like. This is what this looks like. So it's nothing that's really severely in depth, but it gives them an idea of what they just got themselves into. I go over a little bit of the scheduling with them. I'll go over a very fast overview of the LC call number order, how it works, and different things like that with them at the beginning. And then I have training modules broken down into, if a student has some interest in shelving, I will only put a student in shelving if they have an interest in it. So I create a team of shelvers for every section. So I may have 2 or 3 shelvers in one of my sections. So section 1 might have 2 or 3 shelvers, section 2, so on and so forth. I have a training method with them too. So I pull in a workshop. So we go through maybe 1 to 2 hour workshop on a Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon. They get paid to come into the workshop. They get paid for training, and I will go through online training. So I use the Kent State module for call number order on the computer. We watch some videos. We talk a little bit about shelf maintenance. I don't go into too far depth of that because I save that for our stacks management position as well. So same with stacks management. Sometimes I'll do them back to back. I'll do a stacks management workshop right after shelving. If I can overlap them, which I'm trying to do, so I can have our experienced stacks management students talk to our shelvers and help our brand new shelvers out. And that's where I get into creating games, different things like that. I've had students we got to the end and we were playing games. It's like, we don't want to stop. We want to keep going. It was exciting. I really enjoyed it. And I also do the hands-on in-person behind the desk, as well as I take them one-on-one into the stacks. And I joke with the students, I call it window time for me, because I let them do some shelving with everything that they've learned. And then I go back and I start checking their shelving. After probably about 7 books, I tell them, all right, guys, I'm all done. I'm walking away. And I give them the rules before I walk away. If you're not sure about something, don't just stick it on the shelf, bring it back and we'll talk about it. If you're not sure where it goes, I want to know about it. Or if something looks wrong, note it and bring me back here and we'll look at it together. So I'm constantly working with our students in training and some kind of training throughout the semester.
Mitch, we did have a question for you. Do you regularly train several students all at once, or is it pretty much one-on-one?
So one-on-one for the day-to-day activities behind the desk. I'm fortunate if I get 2 brand new students together, so I'm kind of sitting in the middle of them and I'm training 2 students at once. But a lot of the times I'm training 1 student at a time. So I could have 6 new students every semester, or every fall at least. And so I'm training 6 new students separately behind the desk. But in a workshop setting, I try to get like all of our shelvers together and I train them all at once. So, and we're working together as a team. If I have somebody who's doing the Kent State training course, they finish early, I encourage them to help out their other folks, their other team members in the room. And I've had some really good successes that way as well, and have been able to spot some really strong shelvers to be able to move into stacks management a little quicker where we needed them.
So what I do is I do what's called a 5-day training agenda that I use. And what I prefer to do is to train the student workers on an individual basis versus in a group setting. It's always worked for me that way in the past. And the reason that I do it that way is I think one-on-one time with the student worker, especially if they're a new student worker, it gives you a chance to get to know the student worker a little bit and their personality, as well as the student worker gets a chance to get to know myself as well. And you can talk to them a little bit and talk to them about their hobbies and what they like and what they don't like, and just to get to know them a little bit. But the one-on-one training also gives me a chance to do quality time, give them quality time while I'm training them. And I think that's really, really important. That way too, if they have any questions, they can ask me questions. But when I say like a 5-day training agenda, what I mean by that is, for instance, like the first day of training, what I try to do is when they come in for their first day is actually I try to have them come in like a week in advance, if possible, before the semester starts, when the library is a little bit quieter, before all the students come back. If that's not possible, maybe 2 or 3 days, I try to get them started. There's sometimes that doesn't always happen. So sometimes, like if we hire somebody after the semester starts, then we have to do the hands-on training as students are coming in, which sometimes can be a little challenging. So I do prefer to try to train ahead of time if possible. But the first day of training, I make staff introductions. I give them a tour of our library so they can become a little familiar with our library. I also go over safety procedures with the student workers because I feel that safety is number one for our student workers. So I go over fire drills and where the emergency exit doors are, as well as shelter in place procedure. And I just let them know, get something, scenario of some type in your head. We never know what's going to happen if a shelter in place were to ever happen, but just get some scenarios should they happen. But I also show them where the security, what the security phone number is if they ever had to call security, especially at night, because there's usually only one of us on with the student worker. And if something, God forbid, should ever happen to a library staff member, at least this way they know how to contact security and what those procedures are. So the second, third day, I start getting more training as far as they work mostly up at the information and services desk, which is another name for a circulation desk. And I teach them how to check items in and out, how to check Zoom rooms in and out, textbook reserves. I also try to put them on the Library of Congress tutorial. It's a basic tutorial that I put them on and some drills that they go over. I used to put them on a more intermediate to advanced Library of Congress tutorial. But what I found in the past was it would just confuse the student workers. It's kind of like what Mitch said. They end up having the deer with a headlight look because it is very confusing to them. So what I have found that works better for us is after I put them on the basic tutorial of Library of Congress is to take them right over to the shelves and the different areas of the library and do hands-on with the shelf reading or shelving items back, just so they can get a feel with it and show them how it's done. I might hand them 5 or 6 books and go over with them and shadow them and say, okay, tell me where you might shelve this item. Once they do it a few times, then what I do is I give them a few books and I let them do it by themselves. I don't go with them, but I give them like a fluorescent strip and I tell them wherever you're going to shelve the item, put the fluorescent strip next to the item that you shelved. So that way I can go back and check and see if the shelving is correct or not. And this way I'm not hanging over their shoulder and making them nervous while I'm standing there. And it makes them kind of think a little bit more. I also love to do role playing in the very beginning of training as well. So every day when I teach them on something, we do role playing the next day, and then I teach them something new. So all of this usually takes, it's about a 5-day stretch of time. It might seem like a long time to some people, but again, I don't like to throw too much at them because they will have the deer with a headlight look and then they're not learning anything. I do trivia questions with my student workers. I'll throw out random questions and ask them, hey, how many books can a JCC student check out or for how long, and those kind of questions. I give them handouts. I have a customer service piece that I go over with them. I love when I have been to a customer service workshop. I love bringing back the materials that I've received, and I use those materials and I train my student workers on a customer service piece because customer service is number one in our library, and it's very important. And I show them etiquette as far as answering the telephone and what's the do's and don'ts, and give them examples of what is good customer service. So it's constant role playing. And even when they go away, like say for Christmas break and they come back, I'm constantly doing role playing with them because if they're not doing something on a daily basis, they have a tendency to forget what they're doing. So it really helps to do role playing a lot. And sometimes the trivial questions, I might have them, I'll give them a list of trivia questions and they'll write down the answers because it allows them to think a little bit and become a little bit more independent on some of these questions. So it's definitely a lot of role playing is one of my favorite things to do with training with the student workers. So.
Awesome. Mackenzie had a game that she wanted to share.
Yeah, I thought of it when I saw some questions about training in groups. In the past, I've done a couple things that I thought were helpful, especially for shelf reading training. In groups after doing a presentation or having them kind of look at it while they have their laptops, which a lot of them have more now.
Yeah.
I'd often have them do cart organization relay races. So take down some carts, arrange some books incorrectly, and then they'd have to do a couple in the right order for the lowest amount of time, just as a game, like knowing that they're going to have to double check it and it's not going right on the shelves after that, because usually there are some mistakes. But that's usually a fun one that we'd either do at the beginning of the year or at the end, with like a fun meeting that we do at the end, saying like, thank you for your time, give them like a card for the summer kind of thing, be like, here's your last test. So that's like a fun one we've done with them in the past, but is also, I think, a helpful thing to do when you have more than one student. We also tend to go, straight to the stacks just to look at, some hands-on experience there. And just, I saw one question about checking in to see, like, check for understanding. So we try to schedule in a circling back moment every week, to see how the previous week went, what the expectations for that week are, and a check for understanding. Our student workers have split duties. They're either doing very traditional circulation, front desk, answering questions, checking books in and out, or they're working on special projects for us. So because of that, they are seeing quite a lot of professional staff time in and out of there. So every week they get a weekly check-in to everyone with some overview information that they need to know. And then we have two different teams for our setup. So we have a marketing and social media team, and then we have a student experience team. I work pretty closely with our student experience team, and they tend to do a lot of user experience for me as the teaching learning librarian. So that is where I'm able to build in a lot of response. I often have them do Google form quizzes for me. So things that I'm going to bring into the classroom, and then they have surveys at the end of like, how well did you understand the instructions? And that's really helpful for me in my own role, but then also helps me build rapport with them as to how they're being trained, what they're understanding, and how we can improve not only the materials the library is teaching all of our students, but the materials we're using to train our student workers as well. So if you haven't used the Google Forms as their quiz function, I really recommend it. They're really fun. There's a couple of great resources. I'll definitely make sure, I just realized I should send to Christy, that are from a woman who started doing them pretty early in 2020 on escape rooms. So that's what I model a lot of mine off, and they really like the escape room model. So having the students do even training or doing the testing for what I'm sending out as escape rooms works pretty well. So I like those ones.
Mitch, did you have games that you wanted to add?
Yes, so I'm going to start out with the circling back. Kristen had a question about checking in and following up. So I'm just going to talk really briefly about that. So on the follow-up part, I pull my students in after 5 weeks, but that's not to say that I'm following up with them throughout the week when they work. I'll go out and I'll chat with them, and I'll kind of observe, and I'll just talk with them in general. How's classes? Oh, what's going on? What are you doing this weekend? So if a question or something like that, or a patron comes up to the desk, it gives me a chance to observe them while they're actually doing work. So I pull in my students every 5 weeks, and I do random quiz questions using what's called a picker wheel online. And that picker wheel has about 20 to 25 random questions. They can spin for 5 questions, and they are so random. They could be a directional, they could be a procedural, do you check this out? Who does course reserves? What do you do when, kind of questions. And so so Sally's questions might be different from John's questions, So, and they really I had one student who wanted to hang out in my office to keep spinning the wheel. I'm like, okay, you're learning something. And that also gives me a chance to have a conversation with them if they're really missing something in that random question. I can really talk to them. I can say, do you have all the tools you need? What else do you need? What can I do to help you do better at your job? So as far as games go, I have a game that I like playing with my students, and the shelving students loved it. It's called Spot the Mistake. So I have a big long list of call numbers from the shelf, and I may have put one just out of order. I may have put one really out of order. I may have put in an S and an H and a line of H's, and students go back to the picker wheel and they choose I spin for a name to get started. And I have two students who go head to head randomly. And the first student who spots the mistake correctly keeps going. Student who gets it wrong sits down. We spin for another name, and so on and so forth. And this last fall, I had two students who were just question for question answering at the same time. They turned out to be some of my strongest shelvers, and they loved it. We actually played it twice in one training session, and it was a lot of fun. So students just loved it. I have done scavenger hunts, whereas they get clues, they have to look up books in the catalog, pull that book, check it out. And in our system, we can have a pop-up message. So I've included a pop-up clue. So I get them to read pop-up messages, which can be very important. And it takes them to the next one. They have to check books in to get a pop-up message. I put myself in as a clue to come to me to get tips and tricks on how to drop your shift, how to pick up a shift, how to, maybe submit your hours online, different things like that. So, and moving forward, I've got some plans going on, currently living in my head, and several notebooks on my desk. I may be doing a training style murder mystery afternoon with the students and have them kind of figure out, okay, the character I came up with is Musetta Poet Head, mild mannered poetess by day, rogue miss-shelving librarian at night. So, I'm trying to come up with some different fun things. And once we're more okay doing some more small group things post-pandemic, I would like to do some small group meetings with my students as well, 3 or 4 of us together, having coffee, donuts or something like that on a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon. We just get together for an hour and chat, and it can be about anything. So that's keeping our students engaged and interested and really looking forward to hopefully coming to work for their shifts.
Right. This has been a very full 50 minutes already. I'm like amazed and grateful that we have had so much to talk about. But we have a lot more to talk about. So I'm wondering if we might end up maybe scheduling a part 2 of this in another month and like continue our conversation. So I think that we should probably take some more questions and then we can talk about a part 2. Because I don't want to run out of time in the middle of a big topic. So anyone have any more questions, or any panelists, if you want to add to anything that we've already talked about today, but please feel free to chat to us or.
Just remembered one more fun thing. We've been incentivizing our students to do our very large scary inventory process. We're inventorying our entire 40,000 plus collection for the first time in 25 years. So that's been great. And they're doing a thing now so that every time they inventory a few shelves, if they take a picture of a book that grabbed their attention, we're going to highlight it in our Instagram as found in the stacks. So they have been definitely looking at books a little bit more closely and checking out our collection more. So they've really been enjoying that. So that's one fun way to tie them all into our marketing outreach initiatives instead of just our few that do it.
Right. I feel like everything has to be incentivized. We talked about this a little bit in planning for this, but how working, a job is different than class, in that, you're not getting a grade, you're getting money, and like how to like to relay the importance of like you have to come and do the work and do the work to the best of your ability and all that stuff. So that was another point that we had talked about earlier. But thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.